For this project, we're going to paint snow on a tree. The materials we'll be using are a watercolor set, the brush that came with the set, along with a slightly larger brush, a regular pencil, a little white fluid acrylic paint, and watercolor paper. Now if you'd like a clean line around your painting, go ahead and use some masking tape and tape along the edges. And don't forget to press firmly, that way no color is going to seep underneath it. Then using a pencil, let's go ahead and draw a tree. It doesn't have to be perfect, just think of it as a giant triangle with maybe a few rough edges along the side. Then once you have your tree, let's think about where you might want your snow to be and make a few outlines of where you're going to put it. By doing this, it'll help you have some idea of where it's going to go and help prevent you from just filling in those areas. Now this doesn't need to be exact, we're just getting an idea. Now we're going to be doing something called negative painting, but if you need to, you can use either a candle or a crayon to help you reserve your white areas. Now we've used this before, but how it works is that you can either use the crayon or the candle and draw directly on the watercolor paper, and of course you can't see it because it's white or clear, and then you just paint right over it. Now this is just one way to do it, but like I mentioned for this project, we're actually going to be doing negative painting to get our snow. As I'm looking at this, I'm thinking that perhaps I might like a little bit of a shadow on one side of the tree. So using a very light value of a blue color, which means a lot of water and a little bit of paint, I'm going to apply it to one side of the tree. And at the same time, I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit of that color down into where the snow is going to be on the ground. And if the color's a little too dark, don't forget to use your water and lighten that color up. Then using that same color, only in a darker value, which means more color and just a little less water, let's go ahead and apply it to the sky. Now we're working with dry paper, and if we want, we could even try to get some clouds. And to do that, all we really need to do is just paint around a cloud shape. And if the sky seems too light, you can always come back in with more color. Now the brush that I'm using is just a little bit bigger than the one that came in the set, but you can use that one if you'd like. The reason why I want one that's just a little bit bigger is because it's going to hold a little more water and color, and it'll be easier to move the water around. Now I'm thinking that I'd really like to have some very soft trees in the background, so I'm just going to bring the water a little further down to the edge of the snow. This is actually called the horizon line, where the land meets the sky. Now as this starts to dry, I'm going to go back to the watercolor set and mix some other colors. I'm going to use a little black and a little purple, and then just mix it into the color that I already have on the palette. As you can see, it's pretty dark, and it's really not going to look that good if I add it like this into the painting. So to lighten it, I need to add a little more water. Then using my smaller brush, I'll just dab it on where the trees are supposed to go on the edge of the snow. And to do this, I'm just barely going to touch the paper. Now you may want to practice this first, so you have a better idea of how much water to use. Because when you touch a brush to a wet surface, the color can explode, but it can also give you wonderful edges. And that's what we're going to use to get those soft trees in the background. Then we'll continue the tree line down the hill. Now to help give us a shadow underneath the tree, while the paper is still a little wet, let's go ahead and add more color. Then using the same blend, let's bring that color up to the tree line. And if you notice, I have just a slightly irregular edge here. It's not a straight line, because otherwise our painting could look really flat. Now we're going to do just a little more work to the trees in the background and give them a little more color, because our paper's still wet, and if we don't, we may end up with trees that are really light. Now we don't have to add much, we just want to drop in a little bit of color here and there. Now remember, we want our paper surface to be damp, not really wet and shiny, because we don't want to lose the definition of the trees, otherwise it can turn into one big dark area over here. And don't forget, we need to add that color to the trees further down the hill too. Now as it starts to dry, we can start to see some of that purple showing through. One reason why this happens is that when watercolor dries, it's lighter, and it really depends how much purple you have in your color mix when you applied it. Now before we do anything else, let's go ahead and let this dry a little. And to speed up the process, you can always use a hairdryer. Now I really just want the tree dry, so I'm going to hold up my hand and block the rest of the painting from any of that warm air. Then once it's dry, let's go ahead and start mixing the color for our tree. Using a little green, let's bring it into some of that color mixture that we had for the trees in the background. Then using the brush that came in the set, or one like it, let's paint in around those areas that we drew in with a pencil. That's going to be our snow. Now if you notice, what I'm actually doing is taking the tip of the brush and skipping it around the tree. And what I mean by that is that I'm changing the amount of pressure I'm applying and the type of stroke. So the color isn't a straight line and it's much more interesting. It also helps prevent us from making our snow look like it's outlined, and it's a lot more fun. Now just take your time, and if you want more tree showing through, you just add more green. Or if you want more snow, you leave larger white spaces. And if you want the tree and snow to stand out more, just add a little more color to the sky. And when you're adding more color, don't forget to soften those edges with clean water. That way you won't have a hard line where the color ends. Then go ahead and let it completely dry, and if you want, you can take a little white paint and spatter some snow on top. And if you taped your edges, go ahead and remove that. And now you have a really nice painting of a tree with snow using a very simple watercolor set.